All right, it's time to get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Accelerating Action Through GBI's Green Globe's Journey to Net Zero. My name is Miranda Wright. I'm the Education and Engagement Manager at Illinois Green Alliance. I want to thank everyone here for joining us today and learning more about this new certification from Green Building Initiative. Everyone has been muted upon entry. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this program, so feel free to type your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them after today's presentation. For those who are joining us for the first time, Illinois Green Alliance is a membership-driven nonprofit that advances sustainability in the built environment to ensure greener and healthier communities across the state. Through our collaborative initiatives, innovative programming, and advocacy efforts, we amplify the voice of green building community to position Illinois as a leader in sustainable building practices. Our members represent every sector in the building industry, from architects and engineers to building owners and construction professionals. You can learn more about membership, check out our upcoming events, and learn how to get involved by visiting our website. Link will be in the chat. And before we get started, we want to thank our incredible sustaining sponsors for their commitment to our mission. A special thank you to our gold level sponsors, ComEd, USGBC, and Sloan. If you and your organization want to commit to advancing our vision for a net zero future in Illinois, visit our sponsorship page to start a conversation today. We've dropped the link in the chat here. And now let's get started with today's program. I'd like to introduce you to our fantastic set of speakers today. First, we have Nalish Pansel as the Vice President of Sustainable Buildings and Program Innovation. His primary focus is on spearheading program development and collaborating with team members to shape the organization's long-term strategic vision, particularly in alignment with the GBI sustainability goals. Prior to this role, he served as the Director of Sustainability at a leading tech startup, where he has led development of automated building performance analysis and carbon emissions estimation software. Next, we have Kate Callahan as Senior Director of Client Services and Engagement. Her support of GBI's client services team to ensure the delivery of exceptional project management and educational offerings. She is an experienced presenter on GBI's programs and acts as a support for the organization's credentialed professionals. Kate has over a decade of experience in project and customer relationship management. Last reminder, we will have the Q&A session at the end, so feel free to add those questions. And now I'll pass it on to our speakers.
Thank you for those introductions, Miranda. I will just take a moment here to share my screen. Great, we are excited to be here today to present to IGA's membership. Thank you for this opportunity. This presentation is approved for one AIA learning
Kate,
unit.
I don't see your screen.
Okay, let me try again. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about now?
Ooh, yes, we got it. Thanks.
Okay, great. So this presentation is approved for one AIA learning unit. So if you wish to receive credit, there will be opportunities for you to provide your AIA number to GBI, and we will report that on your behalf. The material in today's presentation is copyrighted, but we're always happy to share information with you. So please let me know if you'd like to receive a copy of any of these materials after today's presentation. So we all know that buildings play a big role in the climate conversation, with being responsible for nearly 40% of global carbon emissions, with about 28% of those coming from operations like heating, cooling, and lighting. So as expectations rise for better performing, more efficient buildings, decarbonization isn't just a buzzword anymore. It's really become a smart strategy for adding value and ensuring you're future-proofing your assets. At GBI, we developed the Journey to Net Zero program that we'll be talking about today as a cost-effective roadmap that helps project teams and building owners measure where they are, reduce emissions, and report progress with transparency. We're going to share more about how this tool supports decarbonization efforts and helps your project align with policies that are in place, like the Chicago State Sustainable Development Policy. We'll also explore the importance of decarbonization and the key drivers that are accelerating its adoption across the built environment. And we'll introduce the Net Zero Assessment and Certification Program, showing how it offers transparent, supportive, and a collaborative approach to reducing emissions. We'll look at projects, specifically some of the ones that have gone through our pilot and our program, and how they were able to apply this program to single buildings and an entire portfolio. And we'll also share ways to navigate the evolving policies and industry expectations with the ongoing support and guidance coming from GBI. At GBI, we're proud to support the champions who are driving the change that's necessary in the built environment. This might be through delivering healthier spaces, improving energy performance, or meeting climate goals. But it's really our clients and the project teams who are leading the way, and we are grateful to be able to support that process. We partner with users at every step through the assessment process. We'll talk about that a lot more in depth today, offering a personalized, hands-on approach to help project teams achieve their sustainability objectives. We offer 3 different rating systems: the Green Globe's Whole Building Certification, the Journey to Net Zero program that we're addressing today, and our Guiding Principles Compliance program, which is a federal program. And in 2024, we celebrated 20 years of our collaborative approach to third-party certification. And in 2025, we were excited to pass a major milestone of certifying over 750 million square feet. Our mission is quite simple. It's to improve the built environment's impact on climate and society, and we really do that by empowering those who shape it. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to Nilesh to talk more about the journey to net zero.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. Hey, everybody. We are very excited to talk about GBI's Green Globe's Journey to Net Zero program with you today. And there are certain elements of the slides which might get technical, so please feel free to ask any questions. Towards the end, we'll address all the questions. And if we are not able to address some of the questions, because there might be a few, we'll definitely get back to you after the webinar. So yeah, so what we are doing is developing Green Globe's Journey to Net Zero. Why are we developing this program? And there's so many different certification systems are already available in the market. What we saw was a big gap in the industry, the way the traditional certification systems work. It's always true, false, binary, 0, 1 approach that either you are net zero or you're not net zero, or you are certified versus you're not certified. And we kept seeing a lot of different projects trying to get very close, but not able to go through the last bit, the last step, and failing to be certified or recognized. And we kept seeing it in so many different buildings. And we realized the getting to net zero is not like a one-step process. We cannot just say a building is decarbonized versus not decarbonized in just one day. It's going to be a long journey. For example, if you have a building, it could be any building of any scale typology. Let's say if your building was just done or constructed 5 years ago, and you have gas water heaters. We cannot expect you to decarbonize, take the gas water heater away on day one, because it still has a shelf life of 15 more years left. So it's going to be a journey for you. So keeping that concept in mind, we came up with the journey to net zero. And what it really means is, and the diagram also represents it very well, you could be anywhere in your journey to net zero, either energy or carbon. That means, let's say you have made efforts to reduce energy consumption by 20%. We're not going to penalize you for not having gotten to the 100% mark just yet. That is, there's still a place in the program for you. You can get on the journey. You'll be on the on-ramp stage. That'll be between the 0 to 50%. And then we'll help you get to the 50% mark, which is the first milestone in your journey. And that's when GBI will formally recognize you. So you're still at 20%. You will get on the journey. You don't have any, you can take your time to get to net zero. You can make your own benchmarks. You can go to your different milestones. Once you have gotten to 50%, the next step is for us to help you get to the certified level, which is the 100% reduction in energy or carbon emissions. And we'll do a full assessment for you. You'll understand where do you stand as compared to other buildings, what the benchmarks are. So the idea is to help every single building get to a certain metric or a certain benchmark or 50% or 100% reduction, and not forcing anybody to just get to net zero, and not penalizing anybody, because we all know scientifically it's really difficult to even reduce 70% of the energy consumption or carbon emissions. So we should really celebrate all the efforts everybody's making. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we did is before we launched the program to a broader group of buildings, we started looking at some pilot projects, and we ended up getting a lot of interest across different government and industries and commercial buildings. And these are all the people that we piloted with. We had about 180 different buildings that we were working with, which amounted to close to 100 million square feet of space that we finished through the pilot. The kind of companies we were working with Brookfield Properties, Vornado or Piedmont Office Realty Trust, tower companies. These are all really big portfolios. So not just one buildings. And I'm going to explain how it's really beneficial for portfolios to work with this. And then we also worked with the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority or Salt Lake City on their buildings as well. And there were also some architecture firms like Harka and some global firms like W&R Lindsay in Brazil. So we worked across a lot of different companies for this pilot, and we'll be presenting the results in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. Uh, some of the impacts that we observed as we worked on all these buildings is uh, we saw, as compared to your baseline and the assessment year, because we always have to compare the reductions across a baseline, we saw a number of different metrics were really promising. We saw the site EUI, a reduction of about 525 million kBTUs in energy savings, which if you look at the annual or the average energy consumption in a US house, that's about 21,000 or more homes energy worth of energy. So the impact was significant. We also saw in the assessment year about 6.7% of the overall energy use was of clean energy sources, and about we saw also an increase of about 319% increase in solar or on-site renewables if we compare it to the baseline. And this was a very important metric that we want to see exponential growth in this aspect. So once we do the assessment for the further 3 years, we want this number to go even higher and higher as solar gets more more and more utilized in the industry. This also amounted to a reduction of about 46,000 tons of CO2e, which is again a significant number. And out of the 180 buildings we were working with in the pilot, about 75 of those buildings had no scope on emissions, no on-site combustion of fossil fuels. They were fully electrified. So this is just trying to sum up the whole pilot when we worked across different buildings. Next slide, please. Thank you. Uh, the reason we want to talk about the definition of zero emissions building as it was laid out by the US Department of Energy is because we are looking at a journey idea, right? A building starts a journey somewhere, and then we want to take the building all the way across 50% to 100% reduction in energy and carbon emissions. But that also means when you're starting the journey, you might not completely align with this definition. And the definition has three clear aspects. The first thing is the definition that talks about is you have to be energy efficient, and the DOE measures the energy efficiency across different metrics. For example, it might ask you for a certain Energy Star score of let's say 75 or higher, or if it's certification, it might ask for 90 or higher. So there's different ways it's asking for a benchmarking across that. It might also ask you to have a certain minimum EPA EUI median value or above. The second thing it's asking for, the definition is saying you have to be free of on-site emissions or combustion of fossil fuels. That means no scope on emissions. You have to be fully electrified, and you should be solely powered by clean energy. So these are three clear criteria that's been laid out in the definition. As it relates to the journey, we are saying again, we don't expect you to meet the definition on day one. But the idea is once you're at the certified level, which is the end goal of the program to get you to a 100% reduction in energy consumption and carbon emissions, you are going to completely 100% align with this definition of zero emissions building as it laid out by the US Department of Energy. Next slide, please. Perfect. So when you're working on a program, the program has two different components which are very critical for us to deploy it successfully. First is always the baseline, because you need some things to compare against. You have to create a baseline so you can track your progress. You also need a minimum requirements. We're going to get to that in a second. But let's say, why is the baseline important? First is, again, we are working with many portfolios. You might have 10 buildings in the portfolio. You cannot have a separate baseline for each of your buildings in the portfolio. And we have seen it with a lot of different pilot participants we had, that they have made commitments, which is outward-facing commitments. These are long-term commitments. We are going to reduce 50% energy and carbon emissions by 2030. It could be longer. So it provides to create a baseline across portfolio is really helpful. It also helps you to align with different regulations. For example, we just saw the example of the definition of zero emissions building. You might have some local regulations you're trying to comply with. So creating a baseline would help you with that. And as you're making improvements in your building, and we have seen this happen with a lot of pilot participants that we had who are coming back to recertify, so they can track their year over year consistently and year over year progress. Let's say you made one change or one effort or an ECM. How does it really help you in your metrics? So it's really helpful for that. Next slide, please. For Journey to Net Zero program, we defined some clear criteria on how we can tackle the baseline selection. How do we work with the baseline? And there are two different components to this thing. You can have either a new construction or an existing building. So we have laid out the criteria for what can be a baseline for a new building versus existing buildings. And also, you're seeing a lot of different options here. It's not to confuse anybody. This just shows how flexible the program is, that you could be in any location in US or maybe globally. You still have so many different options. So you don't really have to change what you're doing as per the program. The program tries to accommodate most of the buildings and how the energy is laid. And I'm seeing some questions are coming in. I'm going to get to those towards the end, but thank you for that. And so the first thing is for a baseline, we accept any ASHRAE versions, which is 90.1, 2019 or newer, which are following the Appendix G guidelines for energy modeling. We also accept the IECC 2021 or newer versions to create baselines. If you're looking at a different building typology, for example, data centers, we are looking for the annualized PUE values, which is calculated by the energy modeling. And also we're using the ASHRAE 90.4 values, which defines the ELC, the electrical loss component, and the MLC values. You can also use the most recent model code, which could be the ASHRAE 90.1 2022 or ICC 2024. You can also use those models. And in some cases where maybe you don't have an energy model like easily available or using the EPA Energy Star median EUI as your baseline, we also accept those. So those are for all new construction or new buildings. But if you're looking at the existing building, things are slightly different. Now, you might not have an energy model. You might have a building which is existing. So we're going to ask you for historical data for your building. And since we want it to be an apples to apples comparison, that means we would ask you to have a baseline which is within 3 years from the assessment year. So let's say if you're trying to do the assessment in 2025, we will request you to help create a baseline which is 2022 or newer. So like we can have a consistent baseline, which is apples to apples comparison, and it's relevant data. We also saw a couple of instances where during the COVID times, we had buildings which were not occupied, the occupancies were different. So we want you to have an occupancy of at least 25%. And the assessment year versus the baseline year should have an occupancy within 10% of each other. Because if, let's say, your building was not occupied in 2022, or if it's just 20% occupied, as compared to the assessment year, and your building is now 75% occupied. Now, this would not be a fair comparison of a baseline because the occupancies are vastly different, and that can significantly impact the amount of energy you're consuming and the carbon emissions of those buildings. And we do allow in some cases where some of the portfolios we work with, they had prior commitments. They had already accepted baselines all the way to 2018. So we reviewed the company's data to make sure the data is relevant, it's fully updated. And we did that for a couple of companies as well, with the help of GGAs, which are Green Globe assessors. They are experts in their field and they help us conduct the assessment. And then in some cases, we've also seen either the baseline year data might be absent, or for security reasons, you might not be able to provide us all the information. In those cases, we will accept the EPA Energy Star median EUI, or even an energy model, which is representing the existing conditions of the building. So overall, we provide a number of different ways for you to be able to create a baseline for all different building typologies, whichever it might be, and be flexible for the projects. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So this was how do we create a baseline that we have to compare against. Now that we have done the first step, which is creating the baseline, the second step is let's define some minimum requirements, because there's a lot of different benefits of having minimum requirements. First, again, it helps us compare. across portfolios, across your different peers. You can align with regulations. But the one of the more important things it does for us is making sure before you can look at any third-party instruments, let's say RECs or carbon offsets or whatever that may be, you're actually making efforts. You're employing some energy conservation measures or ECMs to make your building perform better. So we want, or we encourage projects, and we want projects to first use the ECMs before they can jump to any third-party instruments. And then once they have met the minimum requirements, that's where they jump to third-party instruments to make it happen. And then this is also to provide flexibility. So you'll see a number of different minimum requirements. We'll discuss that in a second. So you might be working anywhere in US, or you might be working with different project typologies. We provide a lot of flexibility around what minimum requirements you can use. Next slide, please. Okay, so following the same idea, we have two different types here, new buildings versus existing buildings. The minimum requirements for new buildings and existing buildings will vary accordingly. If you're talking about a new building and we are only trying to reach the recognized level, which is the first milestone in your journey, which is where you cross the 50% mark in energy consumption and carbon emissions reduction. Uh, this is where recognized is. For new buildings, we ask for a 25% energy reduction as compared to the ASHE 90.1 2019 baseline. Or you can also use the most recent model code and show us a 10% reduction. Both of those are acceptable. If you're trying to use an Energy Star score, we expect that to be 80 or higher for all different building types. And then if it's a data center, then we ask for the analyzed PUE values, which is calculated using the energy model, the actual consumption values, and then we ask for a PUE value of 1.4 or lower. And we got this data from a number of different sources, like Uptime Institute's data. We looked at the green grid, and that's how we came to the 1.4 number. And if you have any jurisdiction requirements which are more stringent, for example, in case of uh, we might see in case of Massachusetts or New York City or some other locations, the jurisdictional requirement is more stringent, then it supersedes everything else. If we switch to the existing buildings, now we like all the buildings types other than stadiums, we expect them to show us a 30% reduction in site TUI relative to the baseline year. So let's say if your uh, baseline year is 2022 and your total consumption was 100, then we expect you to show at least a 30% reduction in the assessment year. So you have to bring it down to at least 70 to meet the minimum requirements. And we do allow on-site renewables to be accounted in that. And once you have met these criteria, that's only when you can jump to third-party instruments. Now, we also had a big stadium that we were working with. It was Spectrum Center in Charlotte. And when we looked at the historical data, we realized it's not really that straightforward for big stadiums to show 30% reduction in their EUI. So Spectrum Center was one of the examples we worked with, and it was actually a great example because they not only tried to meet the minimum requirements at 15%, but also they came back to us and they are employing a number of different ECMs, which is the next level of the next assessment year that we are doing for them currently. And we'll be presenting about that in the next coming few weeks as well. When we are talking about the data centers, we are looking at the same metric again. We are asking for annualized PUE, but this is calculated using the actual reported utility data. So it's not really an energy model. It's more coming from the actual data consumption from the data centers. And since existing data centers, they might have been existing, they are already constructed, they might not have the most efficient operations. We allow for a 1.58 PUE or lower to meet the minimum requirements. And again, this data is coming from all the different studies we found online and with Uptime Institute and Green Grid. So that's where we're getting it from. And if you're using the Energy Star score for existing buildings, we allow for 75 or higher for non-multifamily building types. And if you're working on a multifamily building, we are asking for at least an Energy Star score of 80 or higher. And that's how we are defining all the different minimum requirements for both new buildings and existing buildings. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So those were the minimum requirements for recognition. That was your first milestone in the journey. Now, if you're trying to go all the way to 100% reduction in your energy consumption or carbon reductions, and one thing I did not mention is that the projects or users can choose whichever metric is more important to them. And we have seen a lot of projects in which they're only pursuing energy reduction or EUI as a metric. And in some cases, we saw projects and stakeholders are pursuing both energy and carbon as metrics that they want for their projects. So it's totally dependent on the user. So we do provide a high level of flexibility. In terms of the certified minimum requirements, these are guided by mostly the definition of zero emissions building we just talked about a couple of slides ago. So when you're talking about certification, they only allow us to use the most recent model code as the baseline. So we cannot just use the 2019 anymore because this is guided by the DOE's definition. And then we also have to show at least a 10% reduction as compared to the most recent code. So that would be ASHRAE 90.1 2022 or ICC 2024. In terms of Energy Star score, the bar is also higher. So you'll have to show at least a 90 or higher score to meet the minimum requirements. Again, if you have any jurisdictional requirements which are more stringent, they will supersede everything else. You also have to show zero direct emissions from energy use, no scope on emissions, no on-site combustion of fossil fuels on the project. And one thing that we've also done only for new buildings or new constructions is we're also asking for a 20% reduction in embodied carbon. And this could be done by maybe better selections of products, which as compared to the Carbon Leadership Forum's North American material averages. So there are different ways to create a baseline. We have laid out those baselines in detail in our methodology document, which we can also share with you after the webinar. But it feels like the embodied carbon is such an important aspect and we couldn't just leave it behind. So we have included that. The definition of zero emissions building does not really talk about the embodied carbon just yet, but we are expecting whenever that update is made, we'll definitely make sure make everybody aware about the inclusion of embodied carbon in that definition as well. So that's about the new buildings. For existing buildings, again, things are slightly different. For recognition, we were asking for a 30% improvement. In this case, again, this is guided by the zero emissions building definition. We're asking for at least a 35% better EUI as compared the whole building site EUI as compared to the Energy Star median EUI for that building typology for that category. If we're looking at the Energy Star score, we are looking for a score of 75 or higher for non-multi-family building types and 80 or higher for multifamily building types. And then there's a third level, or there's a third criteria. Your building's EUI is less than the EUI specified in the latest version of the table 7.2a ANSI ASHRAE standard 100. In addition to all of these or any of these three, you also have to have zero direct emissions from energy use. So you still cannot have any scope on emissions or on-site combustion of fossil fuels. You have to be electrified. That just the way it's laid out in the definition. Next slide, please. Perfect. So the idea of the journey is to help projects get to the final objective, which is getting to 100% reduction in your site EUI or the carbon emissions. And these are two simple ways that we are trying to uh, take it to the stakeholders and saying, this is basically a flag that we provide back to the buildings which are certified, or if they have a recognition level, it shows you exactly where you are in your journey. In this instance, this is achieving 100% reduction in site EUI. It tells you clearly if the building was assessed in 2024, it would need a reassessment in 3 years, which is the time frame of reassessment, the upper level. That means you can reassess your building anytime within the 3 years, but after 2027 or within the 3 years after the 3 years, you will have to conduct another assessment to make sure the data is refreshed, the building is still performing well, or if you have employed or made any changes in the building, any upgrades, you've employed any ECMs, the impact of those ECMs is also captured. And similarly, a simple certificate or system that shows exactly where you are in your carbon emissions reduction journey. In this case, we want to get or help people get to 100% reduction in carbon emissions. Next slide, please. Uh, we also have a number of different agencies and private companies who recognize GBI's journey to net zero, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. If you're working on a multifamily building that provides you low interest rates for pursuing journey to net zero certifications or recognitions, and it provides you just a better interest rate, which is beneficial for a lot of different projects and teams. If you're looking at PACE equity, they also provide you a very good interest rate if you're pursuing the Journey to Net Zero program. So we always encourage people to to really look into these programs and work with us. We can help you get lower interest rates or better rates by pursuing Journey to Net Zero program. Next slide, please. So one thing that happened last year was we got an opportunity to meet with the city of Chicago as they were developing their sustainable development policy. It was a very important refresh, and I'm sure all the participants here already know this thing. It was the first time the city of Chicago was refreshing it after 2016. And then we were meeting them and we showed them how the program works, what are the minimum requirements, how we're structuring the baselines, the flexibility. And it was immediately like they were very excited. It was included in the sustainable development policy. Uh, and what you can do is if you're pursuing green globes, for 3 green globes and 4 green globes, you can get 80 or 90 points respectively. But if you're pursuing Journey to Net Zero, you can get the maximum number of 95 points, which is exactly the same as the FIA zero or LEED zero. So that really shows us how rigorous the program is. It's really successful. And we have about 53 million square feet of certified projects in Illinois under Green Globes and Journey to Net Zero programs. So we just wanted to mention that for anybody who is probably working in the city of Chicago and looking at the sustainable development policy, looking to get points, that's how the Journey to Net Zero program has been included. Next slide, please. Across all the projects we did under the pilot, which had about 180 buildings, we saw a number of key trends showing up. The trends that people are pursuing to electrify their projects or decarbonize their projects. So we try to relate it out in a very simple fashion on what is impactful, what people are doing. So you can also go back to your projects and maybe use some of these incentives or ideas. The first is building electrification is really important. It is one of the key factors for decarbonization or key trends we have seen across all the buildings we studied and worked with. It eliminates fossil fuel use in operations, so it's really critical. The other thing that we saw is material efficiencies. It really directly impacts your embodied carbon by using low carbon materials, adaptive reuse, or just waste reduction. And we already have a 20% reduction that we are asking for as minimum requirements for any project that's pursuing recognition or certification for new constructions only. The idea is for existing buildings, since it's an existing building, the embodied carbon of those buildings are going to be fairly minimal. They have already been realized when they were constructed. The third key trend that we saw is like sustainability regulations are really driving industry-wide compliance. We saw and compliance, and they're accelerating the systematic shifts in design, materials, energy use, how projects are being looked at, how they're designed. We have a number of different things. For example, Local Law 97, we saw some reporting platforms in Boston, Bordeaux, Cambridge. It was Bureau, and cities really like taking the lead on this thing, and the regulations are really helping people drive decarbonization. The fourth critical point we saw was solar PVs and use of RECs. So scalable renewable energy sources, uh, looking at credible greenly certified RECs. It's also helping people decarbonize their projects at scale and really fast. Uh, we already know that a lot of projects, most of the buildings that are going to exist in about 2050 are already being constructed. So one of the important things we can do to decarbonize those is doing a building retrofits or deep retrofits of those projects, which will directly impact how much operational carbon they will release or how much energy consumption they will have in future, and also reduce their dependency on grid and reduce the load on the grid. So retrofitting existing buildings, it really cuts on the operational emissions. It was one of the key trends as well. Uh, Across all of these things, one thing that was really common was digital transformation. Tools like BIM, we already know a number of different softwares which help you with BIM, doing energy models or doing energy optimizations, uh, carbon emissions estimations for materials, for construction efficiency. I used to work with a company who were developing a software like this as well. We have seen like having information about these metrics by using all the digital technologies we have really helps you make the right decision early on. And it saves you a lot of effort further down the line when you're already in the construction phase, because you've already understood what are the impacts of making a specific selection in materials. Uh, Next one is nuclear energy adoption. One of the portfolios that we're working with, they are heavily invested in using nuclear energy as a source of a carbon-free power that they can provide to their commercial buildings. And I think they were one of the first or early adopters of nuclear energy for their commercial real estate, and we were very excited when they were doing so. And the last is, as we mentioned, the PACE equity, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the financial incentives, the tax credits, grants, or carbon pricing, which is basically getting you a lowest interest rate because you're pursuing deep retrofits or energy reductions or carbon emissions reductions across your projects. Next slide, please. Perfect. Uh, this is one of the projects that we were working with. It's the Millennium Building. It's part of the tower company's portfolio. And what we did with tower companies is we had about 16 of the projects we did. And we don't expect every single project in the portfolio to be at the exact same stage in your journey. So some of the buildings could be on ramp, some buildings could be in the recognized state, and some buildings could be certified. So this building is one of the first certified buildings in DC, certified for net zero energy and carbon. And this is an exceptional example of how an existing building went through multiple renovations. It's completely electrified. They have a huge solar grid on the rooftop, which also accounts for a very large number of the actual energy consumption. It's coming from solar. And we have about seven of the projects from tower companies also recognized. So overall, tower companies was an exceptional portfolio we worked with. And Luke was also able to give us a lot of critical information around how we can help different portfolios, how can we adjust the Journey to Net Zero program for different portfolios, a larger number of buildings altogether. Next slide, please. Harka HQ. So this was a very interesting example because Harka is an architectural firm based out of Portland, Oregon, and they specialize in developing and designing low carbon, very efficient buildings. And for them, it was really important to tell the story around what kind of methodologies they use to get to net zero carbon and energy. What are the strategies that work in real life in practice? What doesn't work? So they use their own project as a means to tell the story to their clients that this is how we have achieved. Harka HQ, their headquarters, have achieved net zero energy and carbon. And it's a beautiful project. We also had a chance to visit the project, and we saw how they have an oversized PV grid. So they went all in on that. They used an existing building, so they didn't really start developing the project from scratch, which saved them enormous amounts of embodied carbon. They didn't really have to worry about that. And it's a very efficient building. There's a number of different things they have done to salvage the existing materials as well. So yeah, like one of the great examples. And they are certified for energy and carbon. They're one of the first projects we certified for energy and carbon and located in Portland, Oregon. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the testimonials we received from John from Piedmont Office Realty Trust and Luke from Tower Companies. We were able to work with them very closely, understanding the requirements of their portfolios, what direction are they moving in. One of the key things we learned from Piedmont Office Realty Trust is how different portfolios look at different ways of decarbonization. So especially with Piedmont, they were more interested in not just pursuing any third-party instruments, but doing deep retrofits of the existing buildings, uh, spending more resources towards ECMs and how do they employ ECMs on the existing building stock instead of going for third-party instruments, just like I said. So that was an interesting approach. Some of the other portfolios were doing a combination of doing ECMs with third-party instruments like RECs and carbon offsets. So we also saw that. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I'm going to hand it back to Kate so she can talk about the process for Journey to Net Zero.
Great. Thanks, Nilesh. So the first step in the process, so that you can really understand how to get started today, is to begin by collecting the necessary data. And we actually have a resource available on our website that just is a documentation checklist for either new construction or existing buildings that lays out the different approaches that you can take for collecting documentation based on where you are at in the process. And that data will be needed for the review. So once a project is registered, you gain access to GBI's proprietary net zero calculator, and then you can begin entering that data into the tool. We'll actually take a closer look at how that software looks here in a minute, but the intention of this tool is to help users with the math that is involved to determine the reductions in site UI and carbon emissions reductions. And as the data is collected and entered, it will automatically evaluate your progress. And so once the data is entered into the calculator, GBI does a quality assurance check. It's really important that the data has a really high level of accuracy and reliability. And there may, again, we're creating this personalized supportive approach to the journey. And once that check has been completed, that's when we'll bring in a third-party assessor to conduct a review of the baseline and inputs. They are going to create a progress report that outlines the specific metrics of your achievements, observations, and recommendations for continuing on your journey to net zero. This report can be used to report out transparently to stakeholders and also to help demonstrate compliance with jurisdictional requirements. As with all of GBI's programs, teams are going to benefit from this highly personalized approach to certification with the assignment of a dedicated client services team member and resources through our technical team, such as Nilesh and his team, and communications with a third-party assessor who is someone who has 10 plus years of experience, who is actually conducting the review and writing that report that GBI will then issue. So here's a look at GBI's proprietary net zero calculator so you can see how the tool actually works. So it's been designed to take inputs for the baseline year and current year, and then to take that data and translate it in such a way so that users can easily understand and evaluate progress in the site EUI and carbon emissions reductions. It can accommodate for various sources of energy, and you can input electricity from the grid, renewable natural gas, RECs, and it also allows users to alternate between the different units of measurement. So whether you have data that's in kilowatt hours or kBTUs, it allows you to sort of input what you have and then can aggregate that total. So you'll see here that it's aggregating it as kilowatt hours. You could do that as kBTUs. So it's really going to be what is most digestible for you based on the data that you have and what you need to be able to report out on. So this is actually the dashboard for your individual building. And it has really easy to understand graphics that allow the users to break down their progress. So you can see reductions in energy with RECs included and without. You can compare the baseline year to the current year that is being evaluated. And then that arrow graphic at the top of the dashboard provides the visual representation for the overall progress toward net zero. We've developed this tool with transparency in mind. It's meant to be very specific in providing those metrics and understanding like if RECs are being used, where those came from. You can see that in various areas on the dashboard. And all of these results are reviewed and confirmed as part of the assessment process by that third-party assessor. So Nilesh touched on the idea of 100% being the objective, but as we've discussed, it's really important to celebrate the various milestones of progressing on the journey to net zero. So what I want to show here is that, whether you're at the recognized level at 73%, 99%, there's these different milestones that are important to be able to celebrate. These are really big achievements, and that is why we developed this as a journey concept, knowing that very few buildings are actually achieving net zero, and that we need to be encouraging more widespread decarbonization of the built environment. We look to celebrate the various achievements. So here you're seeing the example of a recognized building at 73%, but again, with a lot of transparency. So the exact metric that was reviewed, whether that's site EUI or carbon emissions, those are reviewed in tandem. You don't have to, pay extra to do both. It's just part of the process. Both of those metrics are evaluated, and you can report out on both of those transparently. So to really sum it up, this program was designed with volume in mind, and it can be applied to all building types, whether it's being used for a single building or a portfolio. We've received really positive feedback from the portfolio users during the pilot process. And throughout the process, teams are going to be provided with that high level of support that we described, from the client services team to GBI's technical team and the assistance of the third-party assessor. GBI provides guidance for establishing a baseline, as Nilesh discussed, helping take the guesswork out of this process. Within that proprietary calculator, there are resources and information pop-ups that you can access to help answer questions along the way, or we're just a quick phone call or email away to help guide the process. So whether you're pursuing this because of policy level levers, or again to just be working towards decarbonization, there is a place for every building in this program, and it has been designed to be extremely cost effective, so that it can be used at volume. And I hope that some of you today take a look at GBI's membership as well. So we have 1,100 credentialed professionals. We will be doing an update to our Green Globe's professional credential to include a Journey to Net Zero track for those who are looking to invest in their professional development, to be able to better use tools like GBI's Journey to Net Zero program in the marketplace and direct clients towards these efforts. I encourage you to look into that. And members play an important and vital role in GBI achieving our mission. So we're excited to connect with more of you after today's presentation. I've put our contact information up on the screen so that you know that you can reach out to us directly. Both of our email addresses are there. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions just to make sure that we have time to address those.
Thanks, Kate. And I see a couple of interesting questions that came up in the Q&A. So thank you for submitting all the questions. And please feel free to submit more questions. We'll try to address most of them right now. If not, we'll get back to you later. So the first question I see is like, what's the difference between USGBC's LEAD Net Zero and Journey to Net Zero from GBI? This is a very important question. I'm sure LEAD Zero is an excellent program, but there's some very key differences. The first one being GBI, Journey to Net Zero, Green Globe's Journey to Net Zero, is an independent standalone program. What that means is we do encourage people to go pursue whole building certifications, but it's not required, it's not necessary. So if your clients are only they're not looking for a whole building certification, they are only looking to meet metrics in terms of energy and or carbon emissions, they can just pursue the Journey to Net Zero program independently. So that also reduces the cost on the project, and you can actually pursue the project easily. Versus I think the LEED Net Zero is something that you have to first get LEED gold or platinum. Only then you can pursue it. So I think there's some key distinctions in how you can pursue it. You've already seen the requirements. We are very flexible in terms of what you have to do in terms of baseline and minimum requirements. So we are really flexible. We want to work with you to achieve your metrics and targets. One of the second questions I'm seeing is what are the third-party instruments? So like I think that's that would be the Greenie certified RECs, renewable energy certificates, or carbon offsets, which are also from credible sources. They are what we call the third-party instruments. One of the questions I see is Journey to Net Zero is targeted at entities with larger portfolio managers like Vornado, Brookfield, etc., or is it for individual buildings as well? So we'd say it is for all different types of buildings, no matter how small or big. It could be one individual building versus a portfolio. We account for each and every one of them. So if you have just one building that's just 20,000 square feet or less or something like that, you still have a place in the program, and we'll work with you very closely to get you on the journey and help you succeed and meet the targets. One question I'm seeing here is, does the baseline remain constant as buildings that are the part of the portfolio change? So that's a great question, and that's a very important question. The idea of the baseline is to say the baseline, once it's set up, will remain consistent throughout the journey until the point building goes through a major renovation or something significant changes in the building. For example, if you're working on an existing building, which is an office building, and you have already set up your baseline and you are on the journey. So for each assessment that you will conduct, your baseline will remain the same. So we can track the progress you're making in terms of energy reductions and carbon emissions. At the same time, if let's say you go through a major renovation, you're converting the office part into residential, and we are seeing some sort of transformations happening right now as well with a lot of commercial real estate, which was vacant during the COVID impact. So in that case, the building typology changes. The way the building's energy consumption profile is, that also changes. So that would trigger sort of a reassessment and recreating the baseline at that point in time. Similarly, if you have a new construction, you will be able to conduct a couple of assessments while treating the building as new construction. But beyond the 5-year mark, we will have to start looking at your actual utility bills or actual consumption data to make an accurate baseline of what's going on in the building. So there are some minor differences in how we do that thing, but the baseline is meant to remain consistent to track progress. Uh, One question I'm seeing is what's the cost to use G&Z calculator and the entire review process to get the building recognized or
And
certified?
I'm
I'm going to let,
happy
yeah.
to jump into that one.
Mhm.
So yeah, so we again have to work to develop this to be really cost effective. So one of the main things is that again, it's a standalone certification and assessment process. So it does not have to be paired with a whole building certification, increasing accessibility of this program. The total cost is based off of the gross square footage of the building. And so it does vary. There is always a flat $1,500 project registration fee, which will provide you with access to that proprietary calculator that we were looking at in the slide deck, so that you can start to put in your baseline and inputs and whatnot. And then there's one assessment fee. So whether it's new construction or existing buildings, there's just one mandatory assessment that will accommodate those fees for the review of the third-party assessor. And that varies, but at at the top amount, you're going to be looking at in total around 6,000. But then it goes down from there. So it's again meant to be a cost-effective certification.
Thanks, Kate. I see another question here. For large portfolios, how are the shifts in component buildings through acquisition and exits addressed? So that's a very interesting question because for larger portfolios, these kind of things happen. They get rid of some buildings, they add more buildings to the portfolio. So the idea is when you're conducting the assessment, each building is going through an individual assessment. So we don't just look at data in bulk. We actually focus on each building individually. We conduct the assessment for each building, and then we combine all that information to provide you higher portfolio level metrics as well. So if you have a building which is leaving the portfolio or joining the portfolio, it's going to have some shifts in the overall project, the overall portfolio metrics. But each building, when added, will be looked at to find the metrics and help understand what's going on with the building. How do we help decarbonize? What individual energy consumption and carbon profiles are for that building? The other question, which I also saw, is for first milestone and full certification, do you use the reduction with RECs included or reduction without RECs? Great question. You always have to meet the minimum requirements before you can be recognized or certified. So let's say if it's an existing building and we require you to demonstrate at least a 30% reduction, in an existing commercial building, you first have to show us that 30% reduction, and then you have remaining 20% more to go. Now, that could be, you can meet that either by maybe making improvements to your building. You can also pursue RECs if you're not looking at a very long-term strategy, but you are planning around this. We totally leave it up to the projects and the team members to decide which path they want to pursue. But the first 30% are always going to exclude the RECs. You have to show us that you're trying to make the building better performing and making efforts to do so. I hope that answered that question.
I wanted to add to that too, Nilesh. I do see sort of
Mhm.
the question about when does our support kick in? Does it sort of only kick in and this was in the chat area, but kind of just to clarify that, we developed the journey with the idea that some people are not going to be achieving the recognized level. Some people are not even going to be achieving the minimum requirements, but they need a place to get started and they need technical support to understand how to get started. And so our personalized approach is that you can register, you can gain access to this proprietary calculator that has information pop-ups, tooltips. You can ask questions about what is needed from that documentation checklist. So that technical support kicks in on day one. If you have questions today about better understanding sort of what approach, like what documentation you might need for this process, you can reach out to us today. We want everybody to get started, no matter where they're at in the process. And we will provide support whether you're achieving a 4% reduction or a 99% reduction.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. And I am not seeing any other questions that we haven't addressed. Kate, do you think anything else that's pending or not answered yet?
I think we caught it all. If for any reason we didn't, please reach out to us via email or if you think of something after today's webinar.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for spending the time and talking to our community about this awesome new certification from GBI. We will be sending a follow-up email to all registrants, so happy to provide that contact information or any additional links to everyone as well as the recording of today's webinar. So thank you all very much and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you
Thank
guys for having
you.
us. Thank you.